Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. And Tom, I can't think of anybody than a journalist like you that could make such generous and kind comments and be so authentic and warm. I appreciate it. You're a gigantic leader in this industry and a huge champion of the industry. So for that and many other things, I thank you, and we all thank you for all the work you've done. And thank you, Dean Davis, for inviting me here today. What a great day. Students, graduates, and all the loved ones who are here. This is really, really exciting for all of us, but especially for me. I don't know that I've ever spoken to a group this big, and that's pretty cool. My mother was so impressed that she actually flew down last night from New York City to sit right here on the front row and be with me today. And Tom mentioned this, but my wife also, who is without a doubt the most freakishly diehard bulldog in this room, is also here and a graduate of this esteemed institution with a Grady journalism degree in PR, for those of you who are interested in PRs. So I've done a lot of different things in journalism, and there's a lot of things that I could talk about, and I was thinking hard about what I would sort of try to convey. And I thought that since I'm standing in front of a room full of journalists, I would start the day off with what journalists do annoyingly and endearingly so much as they ask questions. So I'll start off with a question for everyone in this room, and that is, what is the oldest profession on earth? Before I let your minds wander too far on that one, I'll go ahead and answer that question myself. You may not know this, but the oldest profession on earth actually is journalism. It's probably not what you were thinking, and you probably might not know what I mean by that. But you have to understand what journalism really is in its core, what journalism is all about. Journalism, at its core, is about one thing, and it's about storytelling. And it's about the journalist telling a story to the audience. And it doesn't matter if that's in broadcast journalism or social media or just an old-fashioned newspaper article. The journalist is telling a story. And that is the one thing that has always made humans different than every other animal on earth, is their ability to tell a story, to capture the imagination. And the first evidence we have of people doing this is, and I sort of look at it as the opening salvo for our industry, is down in a cave in southern France 40,000 years ago. Some ancient ancestor of humans went into the room and placed their hand up on a wall and covered it in ink, some kind of vegetable ink. And it has stayed there for 40,000 years because it's so dry. And there's a handprint on the wall. And when people found it, they thought to themselves, now wait a second, this isn't like some animal leaving its footprint in the mud for all of time. This was an intelligent being who was thinking about something. It wasn't an accident. And what were they doing? Was it art? You know, how cool is it to see my hand on the wall? Or were they sending a message to someone that might be looking for them? Were they about to die and wanted to leave something behind? Whatever it was, they left a story. And the story, very simply said, I was here. And that is the first story that we know that was ever told by humans. And since then, the stories have gone, literally viral, organic. We have stories all over the world. And, we have caves with hundreds and hundreds of handprints on them. They turned into stick figures with stories of people hunting, stories of villages growing, society being created. There's stories of conquests and war. There's stories you'll see on cave walls of gods coming down from outer space. There's stories of the children of gods coming down to earth. And think about what those stories do to capture our imagination. We're the only being on earth that does that. Cows don't sit out in the pasture telling stories to each other. Trees don't tell stories. Humans tell stories. And it is what has made the single biggest impact on this earth since the very beginning. Think about them. Think about stories like the Old Testament. It's a simple book, but imagine what that has done to the advancement and to the thought that goes through all of our minds. Think about Martin Luther King telling a story about the dream he had and the change that one story made in all of our imaginations. It's incredible to think. I actually have right here in my pocket an example of one of the greatest stories ever told. This is a story. It's a $100 bill, a piece of paper that is inherently worth absolutely nothing. It's a piece of paper with ink on it, just like a handprint on a cave wall. But it's amazing what this little piece of paper and lots of others like it can do. All of our minds and all of our imaginations have been captured since we were little kids about what that little piece of paper with ink on it means, because we believe that it's worth something. We believe that if we give it to someone, they will do something for us. Or if somebody gives it to us, we might do something for them. And people will fight over these little pieces of paper. People will, unfortunately, no one in this room, I hope, fall in love over these little pieces of paper. People will even die over these little pieces of paper. But it's just a story. It's something that we have all, as a group of people, come together to believe. And think about that. Think about what putting a little bit of ink on a piece of paper can do. So if you're wondering now what you all are going to go do with your journalism degree, you have to think very hard about that. What are you going to tell a story about? What story are you going to uncover? When you put your pen down on a piece of paper, what's the story going to be? No pressure, just a small little thing. But I tell you all of this not to scare you or sound ominous. I tell you all of this because I want you to know that you have chosen the single most important career that you could choose on earth. You might have friends who will go on or have gone on to get MBAs, or might be doctors, or engineers, or lots of other things, and those are all honorable professions. A great MBA graduate, like Tom, will probably go off and be very successful in business, might make a lot of money. A great doctor can go off and save people's lives. An engineer can make monuments and bridges and buildings that will be there forever. But a great journalist can do more than any of them combined. With a journalism degree, you can have the single biggest impact on earth. A journalist can prevent war. Think about that. A journalist can single-handedly prevent war. A journalist can single-handedly prevent a tyrant in some country from taking office and spreading evil. I do regret to inform you that after years of research, I have proven, or I know for a fact, that most journalists cannot make a lot of money. That's just a fact. So some of the parents in this room might have to continue to be involved. You have to be a very good-looking journalist. The good-looking journalist can go out and make a lot of money, and I think this crowd is probably a good example of people that will go out and make a lot of money with their journalism degree. But the reward for being a journalist is not about money. That's the magic of it. The reward for being a journalist is the opportunity to make life better on earth. And there's a lot of examples on this, to shine light on injustice, to empower people to do the right thing. Who here saw the movie Spotlight? Raise your hands. Anybody? Me too. I saw that movie. I mean, go journalism. This was an incredible movie, and I was thinking to myself, I'm probably the only one who's going to be inspired by this. It's a movie about a bunch of newspaper people. But it won the Academy Award for Best Picture. I mean, think about that. You don't even know who was in this movie, but it was up against The Martian, people, with Matt Damon. I mean, think about that. It was up against Leonardo DiCaprio's greatest movie of all time by far. I mean, this was his ultimate struggle to go get Best Movie in the Academy Awards, and he was beaten by a newspaper movie. It was up against Brad Pitt in The Great Short, The Big Short. So think about that. You're up against Matt Damon, Brad Pitt, and Leonardo DiCaprio, and you need to go out and make a movie that will beat all of them. And you make it a journalism movie. It beat them all. And it did that because it told a great story about what amazing journalism can do. Imagine what would happen. I don't know if everyone knows the story, but imagine, for those of you who do, what would be happening right now if those reporters had not followed up on that story. Imagine what would be happening to all those children and families in Boston if some of those priests had not been thrown in jail where they belonged. It's an incredible story. And now you can go do that. You all can go out and find stories like that, tell stories like that, shine light on things that otherwise might not have light shined on them. And that's an amazing responsibility, an amazing opportunity. I think you all will admit that there are still, we all know of dark and unsettling things that are still happening in this world. Do you think the state of affairs of this world are heading in the right direction? There are problems we have. And the one profession on earth that really goes out and makes sure that people knows is journalism. So you all can now make a difference. You can do that starting today because you have become journalists. And I don't care if some of your friends think you're crazy for getting a journalism degree. That journalism isn't what it used to be. or newspapers are dying, or all the things you might think of when you think of journalism. Journalism has been around for a very, very long time, and it will be around for a much longer time. In fact, our newspaper in Atlanta is probably, and all the others, are probably doing some of their best work ever. The staffs have changed, the focus has changed, but newspapers are still doing some of the very best work that they have ever done. And you also don't need to be in traditional journalism. You don't have to work at a newspaper or a TV station in order to be a journalist. There are so many tools at your disposal to tell a story, to get your message out there, to research and get information than there have ever been in the history of mankind. Think about last year, another storyteller, Adele. So Adele sang a song, a 2-minute, 40-second song, and in 1 month, 750 million people got that story. Biggest download social media extravaganza of all time. And that's absolutely extraordinary. That's an example of the tools that are out there that can get you don't have to print it in a local newspaper. You can print it anywhere to get your ideas out there. But as a journalist, you have to remember one thing. You have a much greater responsibility than artists as a journalist. An artist like Adele, or an actor like Matt Damon, or even a fiction writer like Tom Clancy. They all have the liberties of making things up. But as a journalist, you all have to bear the burden and the unyielding responsibility of accuracy and facts and truth. And there's not a lot of people in this world that bear that responsibility. You have to do that. Everything you say has to be accurate, and everything you say has to be put in the proper perspective. That's another important part of it. You can be accurate, but not be truth-telling. Accuracy and perspective. You can't take the same liberties that artists or sometimes businessmen or others can take. You have to tell it just like it is. And I feel a good example of that is, I think you all would probably agree that Adele's boyfriend was probably not worth all the hype. I mean, you've seen pictures of him. I mean, he's not 750 million people, great, but she sure knows how to make it sound good. But the job of a journalist is not to make the story sound better. The job of a journalist is to go out and find great stories that speak for themselves. And you may not get the opportunity to do that often. Great stories come along only once in a little while. Most of the stories, in the meantime, that you can work on, you should enjoy. Daily, routine stories that give you the opportunity to hone your craft, to take advantage of the time you have to become a good journalist, to wordsmith and edit and have fun getting good at storytelling. Use words well. Capture images like they've never been captured before. Even with an iPhone, you can capture great images, but don't take a routine picture, take a great picture. Every single time you take a picture, make it a great picture. And one day, you all might find yourself, if you're ready, and if you've practiced, and if you've done all those things, you might find yourself standing literally on the precipice of history. You might be like a journalist that was standing there, unbeknownst to them, hearing the Gettysburg Address for the first time. We're all very lucky that there were a couple of journalists there, because after he made that speech, no one knows what happened to the piece of paper he was reading it off of. It only lasted 2 minutes, and they needed to know exactly what it said. He then recreated it and spread it, and all 5 of his recreations were different. So the actual Gettysburg Address was recorded by the lucky journalists who were there, and the ones who put it down on paper, because Lincoln lost it. You may one day find yourself standing on the beaches of Normandy as the only person during the invasion of Normandy with a camera. There was one person with a camera, and that's the only images we have of that initial invasion. Think about that. Think about being a journalist in Rwanda in 1997. I've always found this incredible, when a shipment of 200,000 machetes arrives from China and just is delivered into the state capitol. That actually happened before one of the greatest genocides of all time. Imagine what you could do if you were there and you had an iPhone. Just the simplicity of that. Or imagine, when I imagine this, I always think about, what if I were standing there in the House of Commons in England, right at the dawn of the Battle of Britain, and could watch Winston Churchill get up on a podium and say what is probably my favorite historical line of all time, as the Germans were looming large right over the channel and they were going to invade Britain. And he said, make sure you know one thing, we will never surrender. It was one of the greatest lines of all time, and I think how great it was to be a journalist that day. And when that time comes Just be ready with your craft and with all your tools and all the things you can do to spread that message around the world. Be ready to raise your hand and place it on that cave wall and be able to say for the rest of mankind, for all of eternity, that I was there. Congratulations on becoming journalists. Thank you for having me.